Chapter 11, Glendale Woods. Everyone agreed the plan was complicated. Glendale Woods knew of a wealthy rancher who left a 4-seat Cessna unattended in a remote barn that had been converted into a hangar for one solitary plane. Ray would drop off David, Hunter, Duncan, and Glendale Woods on a dirt road a few hundred feet from the drive-through pole barn. While Ray fished in a stream a few miles away, his two passengers would spend 5 to 8 hours installing a remote robo-pilot. After installing the robo-pilot, they would reassemble the plane. Meanwhile, Ray would check on them about every hour, and he would rendezvous with the team at the completion of their duties. A few days later, the Cessna would be loaded with nerve gas and the robo-pilot would be activated. If all went well, the guided missile would crash in the middle of the night directly into an office building that housed the Memphis office of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. If the BATF office was 86th, the feds would not be able to present a case against Delbert Wayne Duncan. The entire plan balanced on Glendale Woods' electronic and mechanical wizardry. He was not an airplane mechanic, and his knowledge of electronics was even sketchier. But he could take anything apart and put it back together. And if he had all the instructions, he could probably marry the robo-pilot to the plane's gauges. He stated that all he needed was some time and some assistance from David Hunter Duncan to fetch tools and hold the Lumilight and stand lookout for ranch workers. As Ray crept away in his blue Ford truck with his headlights off, the two mechanics lumbered across the pasture of knee-high grass, still soaked with morning dew. Approaching the barn, David Hunter Duncan circled the building and studied the landscape with binoculars. The barn was 1,200 square feet of orange steel with oversized doors originally installed to allow for the entry and maintenance of cattle trucks. There were people doors located at the northwest and southeast corners, perpendicular to the overhead doors. David Hunter Duncan returned to the hinged door where he had left his partner, who now placed racing gloves on each hand. The men were ready to pop the lock if need be, but as expected, the door was not locked. Deciding that it was still dark enough for the hangar's lights to be seen in the distance, David Hunter Duncan removed a flashlight from his backpack and shone it on the dirt floor. The Cessna looked regal under the handheld spotlight. It had been painted orange and white with longhorns. It had been painted orange and white, and longhorns had been painted on each side of the nose. As his colleague studied his patient and readied his tools, David Hunter Duncan walked the inner perimeter and acclimated himself to the building. It was sparse and clean. No rusty tools or road fencing or old paints and pesticides. There was literally nothing man-made except for the orange and white machine that sat alone in the very center of the floor. As the sun hinted at its ascent, David Hunter Duncan pissed in the corner and then searched out the light switch. When he decided that the sun was bright enough outside to allow for internal illumination, he hit the switch. The overhead lights made a buzzing sound, and David Hunter Duncan mounted the portable Lumilight on the left wing of the plane. He directed the concentrated beam to where Glendale Woods had focused his attention, in the jungle of wires secured on the cabin side of the engine well. David Hunter Duncan studied his companion. Of all of his friends, Glendale Woods was the only one to never do time. Not one day. He stated that he didn't even know what handcuffs felt like. Perhaps because he had never done time, Glendale Woods had never developed a swagger. He was incapable of producing a menacing face, and he didn't look the part of a serious criminal. He was short and slightly pudgy, and he wore black-rimmed glasses. He started losing his hair at an early age, and now in middle age he had grown bald in a manner that did not salvage a trace of glamour. He did not shave his head, and the surviving tufts were bristly mix of grays. Despite his gentle middle years appearance, Glendale Woods was absurdly strong. He had the forearms of a carpenter and the hands of a mechanic. He built houses and cabins and garages to put food on the table and spent every non-working minute repairing and restoring and maintaining automobiles. He had competed in powerlifting contests where he used his stubby arms to full advantage, and he placed 5th in one competition. Glendale Woods and his wife, Wendy, had raised 2 boys and a girl, and they all shared their father's interest in things mechanical. It had been his plan to make a mark on the drag racing world. He wanted to establish his sons as drivers and catapult the family name into the lucrative world of custom racing engines. But Glendale Woods had never been good with numbers, and he had to sell off his boat and his cabin on the lake and refinance his house. After the Houston biological attacks crippled the local constabulary, Glendale Woods came out of criminal retirement and was soon moving stolen cars. He had negotiated a reasonable price for his services today, which was largely contingent on the mission's ultimate success. "David, I need that flashlight right away," Glendale Woods shouted with an urgency that shattered David Hunter Duncan's peace. He bounded onto the scene with his handheld superlight, and it shone over Glendale Woods' left shoulder, deep into the bowels of the plane circuitry. On bended knee, Glendale Woods forced a disciplined silence until David Hunter Duncan reacted. "You cocksucker," David Hunter Duncan bellowed. He stomped away as Glendale Woods howled with fits of sadistic laughter. "You fucking cocksucker," David Hunter Duncan muttered under his breath. Glendale Woods had tricked him for the sole purpose of making him breathe his noxious flatus. Now he laughed like a girl. David Hunter Duncan clutched the .38 in his jacket pocket. "Nice knowing you, ass-face. Say goodbye," he muttered under his breath as he marched the 50 paces to his ex-friend. A voice in his head told him to stop, and David Hunter Duncan halted a car length from his target. "Think of Delbert," his inner voice reminded him. David Hunter Duncan studied his new adversary, who had regained his sobriety and now tinkered with the wires. The problem with Glendale Woods was that he had never done time. If he had done a stretch, he would have developed good manners. He would never have done something so crass, so childish to anyone, especially not a respected career criminal such as David Hunter Duncan. Another man would die for such a breach of etiquette. Delbert. Have to think of Delbert's welfare. It won't help the cause if Glendale Woods gets wasted right now. David Hunter Duncan took a deep breath, and then another, and then another. He swallowed his pride and approached his contractor. "Glen," he said softly, and waited for Glendale Woods to look him in the eye. "This shit would get you killed in the big school." "Hey, David Hunter, this ain't Huntsville," he replied glibly. David Hunter Duncan felt the blood rush to his face, and he tried to calm himself. Does this shithead know what he's talking about? It ain't Huntsville. It's always fucking Huntsville. You can take the man out of Huntsville, but you can't take the Huntsville out of the man. David Hunter Duncan was a proud convict. He had a rigid set of ethics, an enduring sense of honor. He was a career criminal. That meant something. It meant that he was entitled to respect, that he had to punish harshly any fool who did not show him the respect he deserved. Again the alarm sounded. Delbert. David Hunter Duncan gritted his teeth and studied the back of the blasphemer's head as he assiduously labored onward. It was such an inviting target. Delbert. Yes, this is all about Delbert. Delbert. Did Glendale Woods just snicker? Forget about the old times. Forget about how they used to break into houses as kids. Forget the Friday night races. Forget that Glendale Woods was his best man and he would have returned the favor if he had not been incarcerated. Forget everything. He never has shown respect for David Hunter Duncan's status. Just then, David Hunter Duncan's cell vibrated in its belt holster. "How's the fishing?" he asked Ray, and Ray could not contain his enthusiasm. He had caught one tilapia, and he didn't care what anyone said about them being an invader fish. Ray liked fish that bit and fought and fried up without a muddy taste. Tilapia were okay with him. Fishing. David Hunter Duncan reminded himself that he had told his wife he was going fishing with Ray in Glendale Woods. Ray had told his wife the threesome were going fishing, so no doubt Glendale Woods had told his wife the same thing. If Glendale Woods took a slug behind the ear, his widow would know exactly where to point her grieving finger. David Hunter Duncan peered out through the creases in the overhead door and through the glass on the walk-in doors. Not a sign of humanity anywhere. He would assist Glendale Woods here and there, and Ray called every hour. After about 3 hours, Glendale Woods announced that the job would be completed far ahead of schedule. Ray called right at 11 a.m. He had caught a half-dozen fish, 5 tilapia, and a fish he could not identify. David Hunter Duncan advised him to release the fish and pick up his comrades. Ray stated that he was taking the tilapia home, that he was releasing the unidentified fish. He affirmed the plan with his usual flat stoicism, and David Hunter Duncan helped his partner gather his tools and cover their tracks. As they awaited Ray's arrival, Glendale Woods produced a user's manual and gave David Hunter Duncan a brief tutorial on its usage. He highlighted a few key points, emphasizing the settings of GPS coordinates. They reviewed their plans for Friday. They were both happy that the Cessna's tank had been topped off by the owner, as that would be one fewer task for them to perform. David Hunter Duncan was heartened by their friendly conversation and thought that maybe, just maybe, that earlier indiscretion could be overlooked. After all, Glendale Woods had not told anyone how he disrespected him. So David Hunter Duncan had not lost face. Maybe they could just chalk it up to an enduring friendship. But then, as they waited patiently by the door for Ray with the vicious Texas heat pounding down on the roof, he did it again. With not even a polite warning, Glendale Woods silently farted again. David Hunter Duncan grew pale. He wanted to flee. He wanted to retrieve his water bottle from his backpack. He wanted to vomit, but mostly he wanted to kill Glendale Woods. Glendale Woods giggled once more, and as he did, David Hunter Duncan's cell rang out a Silver Stallion ringtone. It was Ray. "Meet you on the road in 1 minute." David Hunter Duncan hung up the cell, and the two men moved as fast as they could walk, loaded down with tools and lights and supplies. The retrieval went like clockwork, and soon both men were guzzling bottled water that had been stowed away in an icy cooler. Glendale Woods noted that the heat had gotten the best of him, and he silently sipped the water the entire way home. David Hunter Duncan also felt queasy. It was as if he could ignore the ruthless heat until Glendale Woods farted the second time. He felt a little off equilibrium, and the suddenly got hotter. Now, as they rode 57 miles back to Houston, he didn't feel like talking. The trip would conclude with Glendale Woods farting. The trip would conclude without Glendale Woods farting another time or telling Ray about his prior activity. David Hunter Duncan was grateful for this. It was too damn hot to prove one's honor, and he would vomit if he moved around too much. Now, David Hunter Duncan was focused on freeing his son. But someday, perhaps someday soon, that problem would be resolved. When that day arrived, David Hunter Duncan would turn his attention to Glendale Woods. His old friend would then receive a lesson in manners. David Hunter Duncan closed his eyes and dreamed of that day.